Oh man, I hate losing. Doesn't losing suck? Isn't it the worst? Yeah, okay. Does anybody agree with me? Just raise your hand real quick. Losing sucks? Awesome, a lot of hands. Phenomenal, phenomenal. For everybody with their hand down, who you guys, I'm assuming, apparently hate losing, or sorry, like losing, let me convince you real quick how bad losing might be with these scenarios. So, you just lost a game of checkers to your 6-year-old niece. Going back? Yeah, I mean, look at his face. He's not very happy about that. Or you swore you were the ping pong goat, and then your friend demolishes you 21-1. It's a bad feeling. Or it's fall of 2022, and you're watching on your TV screen, and you just watched Georgia Tech lose to Ole Miss 42-0. It sucks. So, losing is bad. And a particularly bad loss can leave us thinking, oh man, am I a loser? And the answer to that question is yes. You're probably a loser. But I will argue that everybody in this room is likely a loser as well, and chronic losers at that. Stick with me. So a lot of times we compete in these kind of competitions in our head against other people without even realizing it. So a good easy example for this is it's kind of like when you're walking to class and you see across the street somebody on the sidewalk walking the same direction that you're walking. And I don't know about you, but sometimes my lizard brain, my primal lizard brain goes, is this a race? Did he just challenge me to a race? And then suddenly, like 5 seconds later, you're like power walking as hard as you can. And you show up to class, and you get sweat under your armpits. You know, your asthma is flaring up, and you're just exhausted. But going beyond this sidewalk example, a lot of students here at Tech have the same kind of comparative instincts. And with metrics like test scores or like internship offers. And it's easy to do this. And also at Tech, with people who are incredibly bright, these competitions can be very easy to lose as well. So it's easy to sometimes feel after a series of losses that you are a chronic loser and not have any idea why you feel this way. But something about this kind of competition, something that I'll call tonight unconscious competition, it's where you are essentially competing with others all the time without any conscious effort to do so. And when you're doing it, it's unfair because the person you're competing with they have no idea they're competing with you. And so this kind of unconscious competition, it can make us feel bad after a series of losses, but it can also drive us to do things and waste our time doing them. Like, for example, when I was a freshman, one night late in the library, I was studying for a Calc 2 exam, as you do when you're a freshman. And I noticed that at this point in the night, it was just me and some other person on the floor. And my lizard brain kicked in again. And I was like, okay, I'm going to stay at the library longer than he will. I will outstudy him. I will be a study genius tonight. And so it worked. I outstudied this guy, but I was up until like 3 or 4 in the morning. Next day, went to go take the Calc 2 exam. I got a fat 64 because I was so sleep deprived. Meanwhile, that guy who's on the floor probably got a great night's rest and had no idea I even existed. So if unconscious competition can drive us to waste our time and make us feel really crappy about ourselves, what's the solution? And that's where I say it's to control, alt, and delete how we compete. But before I get into that and what that means, I want to share with you all a little bit about my story and why unconscious competition is so critical to me. Well, I graduated from a performing arts high school, just like Victorious. No, we still had to do math. But I graduated from a tiny performing arts school of less than 100 people and into a freshman class of around 4,000 people. It was a big, scary STEM school, and naturally, I felt it hard to relate to a lot of my peers. It seemed like everybody around me had this rock-solid STEM foundation that I didn't have. And they were prettier, fitter, cooler, good-looking, and swaggier, like everything. It was all in my head. And quickly, all these, I found myself comparing myself to everybody, my roommates, the random people I met in a dining hall, and all of the beautiful and talented geniuses that Georgia Tech posts on their Instagram. And it was horrible. All of these kind of losses where I felt beneath my normal noisy day-to-day, and after about a semester and a half of this, I if you were to compare my brain to like a boxer in these kind of fights, it was now bloodied up and desperate for victory in the final round. It was hell-bent. And it even bent my own reality in order to create a fight that I could win. Now, the factors that lead to mental illness are incredibly complicated. They're a blend of environmental factors as well as genetic predispositions, which make them difficult to analyze where they come from and why. But I will say that the stress that I experienced as a freshman that year inevitably led to the bipolar and psychosis diagnoses that I would receive months later. The stress from all these events fed that growing mental illness in the back of my mind and made me believe that I was some kind of scientist making discoveries about the fourth dimension that would make me famous, more famous than my peers. Of course, these discoveries were nothing but logically unfounded manic epiphanies where I would interpret normal things like cloud patterns and hair clippings as signs from a higher power that were deep keys to understanding the universe. My mind was literally all in on trying to beat my peers. And then things unraveled. That spring semester, I had multiple psychotic episodes that pulled me out of school and into intensive therapy programs. I left school to live at home. And when I did, I felt my ego, my identity, enter a free fall. I felt that I couldn't compete anymore, and I wanted to drop out of school. And eventually, my free fall landed, and I was in rock bottom. And now for anyone who wants some kind of visual aid of what rock bottom might look like, here's a photo of me taken with my two sisters that Christmas break. So, a little bit of context, my wisdom teeth were taken out a day before this photo was taken. But the energy is exactly what I'm going for here. I'm sitting, my body language is crossed. I look so angry from the sidelines. And it was ultimately a horrible time in my life. Now, I'm here. So, what happened? Well, when I came back to school, I kept, semester after semester, things kept improving, and I can say now that life has been better for every one of those semesters since that dark point in my life. And I want to explain to y'all today how that happened. The first thing is that I have the best friends and family in the entire world. Not that it's a competition, but I am so grateful for the support I received in that time of my life. And if I had not received that support, I could be in a much darker place right now. But second, I started commuting to school. And now commuting was naturally a very time-intensive activity. After classes, I would bike to the MARTA station, hop on the train, get off the train, then after that, I'd hop on a bus, get off the bus, and then I'd walk from there to my house. But strangely enough, it was just what I needed. So there was never a point in my life where it was as easy as it was to socially stay in my lane. I would show up for classes, I would catch a meal with friends, and then I would go home. I ended up spending remarkably less amount of time around tech students, and thus I spent a remarkably less amount of time habitually and unconsciously competing with tech students. In that semester, I took a step back, and I looked and I saw how my environment influenced my habitual competition. But then I took another step back, and I thought about how I could influence my own habitual competition. And that was a game changer. From there, I realized I had more autonomy than I thought. I could decide when I competed and when I didn't. And when I did that, I realized that I was on a much better trajectory towards the future. So, I know we all have these same kind of lizard brains in our heads that makes us do things that we don't want to do. So tonight, I'm hoping to share some of my advice and tips for how you can better manage and control your lizard. So, does anybody know what the first step is? Can I get anybody to shout it out? First step, what it might be. Good job. Yeah, excellent. Nice, you guys did your homework. Fantastic. So the first step is to control when you compete. And so for me, it helped dramatically when I was able to leave college for a few months and then kind of look back on my life and see, oh, I was doing all this and all this. So I would advise anyone who, if it's possible, to leave the environment where you normally compete in. So this could be like your lab, where you work, it could be your dorm room, or all of the above. But once you identify this, it's easier to get out of that and look and analyze better how you're competing. And the focus of this is being realized when and where you compete. So I don't know if anybody in the audience checked out once I started hating on competition. The point of this talk is not that competition is a bad thing. I mean, competition has led us to amazing innovation in both medicine, engineering, and it got us to the moon. And Darwin would argue that there would be a different species giving a TED Talk today if we did not all compete. So I'm not going to say you shouldn't compete, but you can also alter how you compete. So instead of taking these competitions that are in your head currently, it can be helpful to put them into the real world, define rules between you and your competitors that you have not done before. And so one thing that's inherently unfair about unconscious competition is the fact that the person that you're competing with doesn't know you're competing with them. And so if you're able to put it into the real world, the competition can be much better for both sides. And so, okay, sounds great. What does it actually look like? Well, last year, my roommate and I, we both wanted to eat less sugar. And we were also both acutely aware that the other person was trying to eat less sugar. So what would happen is these kind of awful behavioral patterns where I'd walk in on him eating cake and I'd be like, gotcha! And then I'd make fun of them. And then vice versa. It was just not a healthy kind of thing. And we were very kind of punchy about it. So I realized I could create and gamify the situation in both of our heads into something that I call the sugar tracker, which looks like a pretty insane thing we put on our fridge. But it helped to define what a win and what a loss was, and it helped both parties understand what that meant. And we've both eaten less sugar since that day. So that's alt. The last part of this puzzle is delete. So delete how you compete. So what delete, I guess what I would call the principles of deletion are that a conversation can be all it takes to extinguish a dangerous competition. So one of those two different kinds of conversation tools is speak competition into and out of existence. So a great example of this is when I was applying to be a speaker here today, I learned that my roommate was also speaking today. He told me, he said, oh, I'm also applying. So I said, great, that's great for you, awesome. And then as I was writing my application, thinking about it, I was like, that is not great for him. I hope that I get this instead of him and that he doesn't get it at all. And I was like, wait, this is perfect. And so I did something kind of crazy. I walked up to him, and I told him exactly what I was feeling. And then in that moment, there was almost this camaraderie. And he was like, great, let's try to help each other figure out the best way to give this application and this talk. And now I'm pleased to say that my roommate is the beautiful Donald G. who spoke first here tonight. Having him help me and me help him was mutually beneficial, and I don't think my talk would be a fraction of what it was without his help. And now for the second deletion method. It's about telling someone that you admire them, which sounds kind of crazy. But it's definitely a great way to ease any kind of tension in a relationship and put it into a constant mental slugfest between you and someone else. So recently, I told a friend when I was, after months and months of kind of, insecurity, I told him that I thought he was smarter than I was, which is kind of scary. But after that, it was like this dam had been burst, and he felt comfortable telling me nice things about myself. And we had this lush discussion about habit, about talent, about intellect, and what it meant to be smart. And we walked away from that conversation with a much deeper respect for one another. It was amazing. And what I would say is that it's scary to tell somebody things like this, but it has only ever led me to better relationships with my rivals. And now there's an asterisk kind of behind this whole thing. It's okay to actually have this competition be in your head, but you have to kind of say, I'm fine with competing in my head. I don't know what this guy's talking about. It's cool, but you have to agree to the terms and conditions behind unconscious competition. And that is, it is inherently unfair. The person you're competing with has no idea that they're competing with you. And to assume that they would play with the same rules in your head is inherently a bad thing. So whatever victory or loss that is the outcome of this competition must be taken with an appropriately sized grain of salt. All right. So before I end tonight and you guys go out into the world and start thinking about how you can change how you're competing, I want to share one more visual aid with you. Okay, it's the same photo, but a different point this time. My pose and this guy over here is exactly how it looks and feels to unconsciously compete. People around you are happy. They're having a great time. But their success is your failure in your mind. This is awful. Instead, be this guy. Take the people who are in your life who are happy and joyful for their success and be happy and joyful with them. Their success is not your loss. So, how is unconscious competition affecting your life? Is it paralyzing your relationships? Is it paralyzing you? Give your life the motion, the energy, the freedom it deserves, and control, alter, and delete how you compete. Thank you.